Hello and welcome. A very good morning to everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you back for the week 2 of this bootcamp on acing the PM internship. I'm extremely sorry that we got delayed by 10 minutes. So there was a technical glitch which we were trying to resolve. So without further ado, let me quickly tell you about the structure of today's sessions. So the first session is all about what you get to do while you are pursuing a PM internship, what are the challenges that you will face, and what you can do to maximize your chances of getting a PPO. That would be the first session. We would also be joined by a very special guest, Malvika, who would be talking about her own internship experiences and giving you some valuable inputs on how you can maximize your chances of getting a PPO. That would be the first session. Then we'll have a 10-minute break. After that, we'll be moving into the second session of the day. The second session will be covering everything you need to know about how to use LinkedIn to maximize your chances of getting a PM internship. We'll be focusing on the basics of your profile, how do you network, how do you cold email, and how do you find the right companies. So we'll be covering all those aspects in the second session. So without further ado, let me start this session. I'll just quickly invite Aditya on stage, who will be presenting with me.
Hey, hi guys.
Aditya. So I'll just start sharing my screen. Let me know when it's visible. Is it visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay. So let me start with a quick question. I will be flashing a poll on your screen. Just take a moment to answer that question. Just have got one choice. Five more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So we have the results are quite largely in favor of Indian tech giants, which is a very encouraging sign. Around 45% of the people want to intern at Indian tech giants, 25% in global MNCs, and around 30% in smaller startups. So yes, we'll be covering most of the presentation will be focusing on getting an internship at Indian companies, both the big tech giants and the smaller startups. So let me quickly dive deep. Right. So some general hygiene rules to get the most out of the session. Keep sending your comments and observations in the chat box. Post questions in the chat box or in the questions tab. Even if we are not able to pick them up, we'll answer them separately later on. Last is volunteer to answer questions. And as I said last time as well, I might not have all the answers, but we can definitely help you find the answers. So the first question, before I begin, I would like to ask your perspective on this. Why do you think companies hire PM interns? So what is it that you think you bring to the table, or why would someone go and reach out and get a PM intern fresh out of a college? So if anyone has any perspectives on that, just put it out there on the chat box. Okay, so Akhil tells us that it's to get fresh ideas from graduates, valid point. So since you don't have like the baggage of knowing the product for a long time, or you don't have preconceived notions about that, how that industry or that domain works, it is your inputs are very valuable because you will start with a beginner's mindset and you will think from first principles. Right. So most of the suggestions are around similar lines. Rajat has another good point, transforming them into full-time PMs. So yes, I think it is a great testing ground to see how well you do as an intern, train you, and then maybe see if you are ready for a full-time role. Arundhati talks about we bring our skills and the willingness to polish them and learn more. Absolutely, great point. Sayed says that it helps make coordination between different teams easy. And Himanshu says to capture talent when they are young. Absolutely great point. So now I'll quickly talk about what my understanding is. Why do we need to hire PM interns? Uh, First is internship acts as a testing ground. So you can evaluate potential candidates before offering them a full-time role. And you'll see that most of the global tech giants such as Google, FB, and the Indian tech giants such as Flipkart, Ola, they have an APM internship program for students doing their MBAs. So the process is pretty much standardized and structured. So especially for the big companies, internship usually acts as a testing ground to see whether you are capable of doing a full-time role or not. Second is a lot of the larger companies, they have made a brand name for themselves. So they want to utilize their brand value and attract bright college students. So every company wants the best talent to work for them. So generally, the philosophy is you need to catch them young. So colleges are the best place to find such talent. They companies want to get raw talent and train them for the bigger stage. So the first 2 points are very relevant for all the larger companies that are out there. But in case the companies are smaller, for example, the startups that offer interns, they might be having a lot of resource constraints due to which they look out for PM interns. So one could be they want to offload work from the full-time employees. And another thing, so this is sad but true, they might want to get work done at cheaper rates by hiring interns rather than full-time employees. So one important thing to know here is why should you know that you should answer, why should you have to answer this question? So the main reason why you have to answer this question is because if you're able to know why is the company hiring interns in the first place, you will get a lot of understanding on what is the kind of work that you'll get to do and what would you need to do to leverage your chances of getting an internship. So I'll give you an example here. A lot of the companies such as Razorpay, Farmeasy, Lenskart, they have programs in place for hiring APM interns. And the benefit here is they very much care about grooming you, and they give you a lot of freedom. They're good in terms of stipend and perks. So they are in a way investing in you. So you can be assured that you will get a proper structure, you will get good mentorship if you go in those sort of companies where they have standardized APM intern programs. On the other hand, if you are going to a startup, then obviously it does not act as a pipeline for identifying bright candidates. So they are mostly trying to offload work from full-time employees. There is not a lot of structure. So you might face issues in terms of the work you get, the quality of work you have, the mentorship. So you need to keep all those minds and understand what is the motivation of this company to hire you. Because once you understand the motivation, you will be in a much better position to make a decision whether you should join that company or not. So that is the first question that you need to answer. The company which you want to go to, why is it hiring a PM intern in the first place? Second thing you need to understand is, as an intern, what are the limitations? So why this is important is because you should realize what you're bringing to the table. And this can help you rationalize the work given to you and not be too disappointed if it's not in line with expectations. So what I'm going to talk about now, obviously, it might not be true for all companies because every company has a different culture and different thought process. But this is what I have generally observed are the limitations of a PM intern. So first thing I've noticed is that there is a fixed time period of around 3 to 6 months. And generally, this is not enough to complete the entire life cycle of research, prioritize, and build. Second is you are coming with negligible experience. So again, this might not be true if you are coming in as a lateral intern or if you are an MBA. But generally, if you're a college graduate, you don't come with any experience, which would mean that the strategically important priorities would usually be reserved for the full-time employees. Next is you have to be coached since you haven't worked in a fast-paced environment before. So they'll always prefer to provide you simpler projects. And last is usually since you are bringing an outside-in perspective, the focus will be more on discovery rather than execution, because execution usually requires some amount of experience, and the time it would take you to gain that experience will just mean that the intern is almost over by that time. So whenever you are rationalizing what is the kind of work you will be given, you always have to remember that these are some of the limitations which might restrict you from getting the best projects you want. Again, in startups, for some startups, this might not be true. So I know people who have gotten execution work within a week of joining, and they have also gotten a lot of ownership. So there, the limitations might not hold true. But generally, if you're going in a bigger company or more startups, you might be given lesser high priority projects just because of the lack of experience at your part. Right. So, what I want to talk about here is why knowing your limitation is important. So, one thing to understand is that it's important for you to stand out. So, as we talked in the week one of the boot camp, that you need to work on building up your profile. You need to maybe when you're applying to a company, clearly mention why you're a good fit for that role. Maybe send a pitch deck which talks about the points of improvement in that product. So, knowing that companies or product managers might not see you as an asset makes it very important for you to try to stand out. So you have to work extra hard in terms of impressing the prospective employer. That is the first thing. And second important takeaway from what I just discussed is it's important for you to choose the right company. So you always go, as we'll talk about in the next session, you always need to understand whether that company has a history of hiring PM interns or not. So if a company doesn't have a culture of hiring PM interns, which you'll quickly come to know by going through LinkedIn, they won't usually make an exception for you because their mindset is that interns are more of a liability than an asset. So it's better not to waste your energy by applying there. So I would say these are the two key takeaways you should keep in mind while you are going ahead with your PM internship plan. So next is, again, once you get an intern, then what are the different kinds of projects you might get? So by far the most common project that I have seen is the market research or competitor research. And here you usually have to talk to customers, read research reports, analyze what your competition is doing, and then maybe identify what the product is lacking in and make some suggestions to the company. Why this is the most commonly used project? One is there is less downside of you here not performing well. So if you're given an actual high priority feature and you're not able to perform up to the mark there, then it's a loss for the company. But if you're doing market research, competitor research, and you don't do a very perfect job at it, still the company is covering its bases. So that might be a reason why they give you a market research project. The second reason here could be because most of the PM team is usually so neck deep into execution, or they have their own biases because they have been in that industry for a long time. So if somebody comes from outside, has a fresh perspective on that entire industry, they'll be able to do a lot of justice to that market research or competitor research and come up with a lot of good ideas, which might not be the case for someone who's working there for the last few years. So those are the two reasons which I feel you're generally given market research or competitor research projects as interns. Second is you could be given projects around researching on a new feature or initiative. For example, the company wants to integrate a customer chatbot on the product. Then you might be asked to research on this or define a workflow around this. Third could be you could be asked to set up a system or streamline a process. For example, you could be asked to set up a system for collecting and analyzing customer feedback. And last is you get to do the basic stuff, work on user research, data analysis, which a PM would work. And in probably some of the larger companies where they are giving you the usual responsibilities of market research as well, but they would also want you to spend your day-to-day assisting the actual PMs or the senior PMs in sketching out user flows, writing PRDs, or launching a feature. So as this list clearly shows, depending on the kind of company you're in, depending on the experience you have, and depending on the stage at which you join, the kind of project that might be given to you could be very different. So don't think that, okay, this project is good or bad. So never approach a project with that mindset. Whatever project you have been given, try to complete it in the best possible way. And if you feel you can do even better than that, first do justice to what is the project that has been given to you, and then go ahead and ask for more work, because that will help build trust between you and your manager. So I'll take a pause here. Aditya, maybe you would want to talk about how what was the kind of projects you have done while you were interning.
Sure, cool. So actually, yeah, the competitor research is the go-to project for most interns, and the reason they do that is it's the best project to understand the domain, right? Like, just like see, if for a good writer, you have to read a lot of books, and same thing for being a good product manager, you have to know a lot of products in the same domain. So if you are in fintech, you should be looking at Paytm, GPay, other fintech companies as well.
Right.
So, and one more thing about market research is that it's not just from a PM point of view. Like, if you're interested in startup ecosystem, market research is the best way to like understand different domains and understand, so that it helps you in ideation as well, especially in product management interview questions. But in terms of projects I worked on, other than market research, there was basic experiments. So there's something called as an A/B testing. So sometimes interns get the chance to like do the discovery, talk to users, talk to customers, and then suggest small changes in the product, which can actually bring incremental improvement in the metrics. So running experiments like whether this button or this call to action will work, or whether this copy should work or not. So running these A/B experiments are something which interns can take. Some other projects are like working on chatbots as well, working on customer support, working with customer support clearly, and understanding what issues they're facing, how to streamline the process. All of this is very important. And if you're lucky, and I think you should always push for it, is to write a PRD. So PRD is like the holy grail of product management. It's that one document you write which every stakeholder will read and judge your effort as well as build the product into it. So as much as possible, do talk to your managers if you have an internship opportunity to work on a PRD. I did write one or two PRDs, and it's a very important thing because it helps you to write. And once you learn how to write, your critical thinking is as well improved. Other than PRDs, basic data analysis is very important. I would suggest learn SQL, be comfortable with data and metrics, right? Understanding what to track is so important because what you don't measure, you don't control. So being confident in looking at the data and understanding that is also important. Finally, important thing which interns do is be like the customer advocate, more clear than the PMs in themselves. You continuously do user research, user calls, or you're continuously looking at other companies and then just giving a heads up to the PM saying that this company is doing this. So you can keep sharing resources. You can always try to streamline this process as well. So yeah, that's one more
Right.
thing. Like, be
Right.
more user centric as well.
Got it. So I think Aditya has mostly covered what was there supposed to be there on the next slide as well. So why it's important to know what kind of projects you'll be given is because it helps you be better prepared for those projects. So as Aditya mentioned, most of the things you will learn on the job. So you shouldn't like break your head on, I should know the structure of doing this, doing X, doing Y, doing Z. But you should rather focus on developing the core skills because you are in college, you do have the time to focus on those aspects. So one core skill which you should focus on right now is your communication. Communication is both written, as Aditya said, PRD is the holy grail of any product manager's role. And second is the verbal communication, because the more clearly and concisely can you articulate something. So you have to articulate a lot of things. You have to articulate the vision of the company. You have to articulate the problem which you want to solve. You have to articulate the solution which you are building. So all those things require very good communication skills, and it takes time to build good communication skills. So it's better to start on both these aspects of verbal and written communication right now. Second is developing critical thinking. So you should be curious when you are reading about something, develop the habit of questioning whenever some information is presented to you. So I would say these two aspects are something you should start working on. One is your communication and second is your critical thinking. I think these should be good enough to help you perform better or even excel at the projects you're given. Rest everything is something that you can easily capture on the job itself.
Yes. One more small point to add is whenever, suppose before you're working in the company, always understand, first is make sure that you look at the CEO's video or anything just to understand how he articulates the company, what is his vision and mission. Number two is go to the company website and understand their value points. Like, what is the key proposition which the company is saying? So this is very important because you want to first of all make sure you're aligned with the company, but also understand the basics which is required. Like, so the basic business knowledge about the company, like maybe the revenue model, what are the different product lines in the company. This all can be figured out through googling itself, right? At least for most companies, if it's not too early stage startups or stealth mode startups. So do that before you join the company itself, so that you already have some context before you're taking up any projects, or so you can ask the right questions. So that is also very important before you get prepared.
Right. Next is I would want to talk about the challenges you'll face, because as someone who's going ahead as a PM intern for the first time, there'll be a lot of challenges. And if you have an idea about the kind of challenges you'll face, you'll be better prepared to overcome them. So it's important to understand what you're getting into before you actually do that PM internship. The first problem which you usually face is that the understanding the functional domain might be difficult. So, for example, if you get an intern at a fintech company and you have no clue about how fintech works, what is the business model. So, if you're not understanding that basic thing itself, you won't be able to contribute well to the product. Second is, so usually what would happen is they'll give you maybe some feature to work or some broad problem to solve, but you won't have a clear understanding of how exactly do you go about solving it, or what is the success criteria. So whenever you are starting something, you need to know at the end what should I do so that at the end I can be considered successful or failure. For example, if you are, say, preparing for an exam, then at the end of that exam you get certain amount of marks which decides whether your preparation was successful or not. But in an intern, especially in a PM intern where the project is going to be vague, you might not understand, okay, what do I need to do so that this project comes out well, or how do I know that this didn't come out well. So that is another challenge which you'll face for the first time. uh, Another thing is the product or the project itself. It might be too overwhelming or complicated with you. For example, if there is any app that has been there for the last 10 years, then obviously it will have a lot of workflows, it will have a lot of features. So it might just seem too overwhelming for you. For example, if someone says, okay, your problem statement is that you have to improve the adoption of this app. Now that app has like tens of different features. How do you know which feature will help the user, which feature does not help the user? So at that moment, it's important to break down that seemingly overwhelming problem that you have been given and then go forward from that, because otherwise you'll just feel as if that project that's been given to you is impossible. So the main motive of telling you all this is that these are the challenges which everyone faces. So I have done an MBA, I have taken up a PM job. Still, when I went into my first job, I faced these same kind of challenges, because you don't really know where should you start, where should you end. So it's important to understand that nobody is a genius, everybody will be facing these kind of challenges. You just need to make a plan to deal with these challenges. So that is the main motive here. Second thing is, so I recently talked to a friend who is interning at a startup. So he has done his MBA and he's interning at a startup. So he told me some unique challenges which he was facing. So I thought it would be good to share them with you as well. First thing he mentioned is there is a lack of documentation. So in a startup, usually there is not much time to document whatever is being done. So most of the knowledge is residing with people. Second is there is lack of structure. So there are no defined processes. For example, in larger companies, you'll have a sprint grooming, a sprint planning meeting, you'll have a quarterly planning. So everything is very structured and well defined. But in a startup, things might not be structured. And that brings me to the next point, where the priorities could be changing very fast due to lack of a strategy. So one day you're working on task X, then another week your boss just might come and say, no, no, we don't want to do this, deprioritize this, let's do task Y. So that kind of frustrations you might have to face while you're interning at a startup. And last is usually there is very little hand holding. So in large companies, you usually have a mentor or a buddy who's assigned to you, who will guide you. There are a lot of resources at your disposal in terms of documentation or in terms of the things you can read about or watch, training videos. But in a startup, usually there is very little hand holding. So you have to take things on the fly. So these are some of the challenges which my friend faced while he's interning at a startup, and probably you might also face them. So it's important to be aware of them. And in the next slide, we'll discuss how actually do you overcome all these challenges. Right. Uh, so the first thing which you should focus on is your colleagues are your best friends. So you have to talk to everyone. You have to talk to people in the engineering team. You have to talk to people in the design team. You have to talk to people in customer support, in sales. You have to talk to other PMs. You have to listen to what your senior management says about the product. because that is the only way you can gain perspective on the product. So the more you talk to others, the more you learn. So that is the first rule. And for the first rule to succeed, you have to follow the second rule as well. So don't be shy of asking dumb questions. So here I'll use a quote from Confucius. So he says that one who asks a question is a fool for a minute, and one who does not is a fool for a life. So keep that in mind. You might think that this question is too dumb, or I might sound ignorant and I should better keep shut. But that is not how you learn or how you'll grow. If you have to be a great PM, you have to be shameless about asking questions. If you don't know, like even a basic details, how something works. For example, if I am joining AirMeet and I had no clue on how video conferencing works, then I have to ask people that how does it work? What is the technicalities associated with it? Because only then will I be able to contribute better. That is the second point. Third is focus on building relationships. Like, don't be transactional that, okay, I have this work, I'll just go and chat with this person for 10 minutes and that's it. So focus on bringing informality into your conversation. So try to talk to people beyond their like usual work as well. So you must be having some interests, some hobbies, like playing sports or say watching movies. So similarly, other people are also normal human beings apart from being your colleagues. So try to build a rapport with them, like try to talk to them about things other than work. So this way, when you develop a rapport, it becomes much easier to work with them. Fourth point is you need to understand the functional domain, whether it is fintech or video conferencing or edtech. You need to understand the basics. How does the business model work? Where does the revenue come from? What is the suite of products? So make sure that you do all this. And a simple Google search should help you suffice, or talking to a person. Reading reports is another way, but in the beginning, I won't recommend it because it might get too overwhelming with you. So just focus on doing basic Google searches and talking to your colleagues on any questions you have. Next is talking to customers is extremely important. So again, this point was something which Malvika also stressed on when we were discussing about this session. So usually what will happen is when you go and talk to internal people in your company, everybody has their own challenges and set of problems. And when they tell you about them, it will seem as if their problems are the biggest problems. Uh, and as a PM intern, you are always willing to please everyone. So whenever you listen to someone, you'll think, oh yeah, he's telling a very big problem. This must be solved. Yeah, so I'll put it in my presentation. This is a top problem. But this is not how it works. As a PM, while you have to keep in mind the interest of stakeholders, but for you, the interests of customers are paramount. So always focus on what is the biggest problem which the customers are facing rather than the internal problems, because they might be process problems which would have a different solution. So always talk to customers and identify the problems from their perspective. Right. Next is expectation setting. So what does expectation setting means is, as I told you earlier, since the problems are too broad, the success criteria might not uh, be very intuitive for you. So you have to clearly discuss what is the expected outcome from this project when you are handed it over. And don't just start running over it. So your boss tells you to do market research and you start download 5 reports, start reading them. Don't do that. Uh, Sit down for a moment, like clearly write down what is the project you have, write down what are the goals you have, write down what will be your deliverables, and then go and discuss with your manager that I feel these are the goals and this is what I should accomplish. So once that expectation setting is done, you'll have a much clear idea of what exactly you need to do to succeed. Because otherwise you'll just be beating around the bush, and when the internship ends, your manager might just come and tell you that, boss, you didn't perform well because we were expecting this and you ended up doing this. So don't do that. Focus on setting fair expectations with your boss. And last, but I would say this is the most important. Probably as students or as I would say privileged kids, we are always in that mindset of cribbing about things rather than solving them. So when you go as a PM intern, you will find hundreds of problems that are there. They might not be structured. People might not be willing to give you time. Uh, Nobody might be concerned about your success. You might find it difficult to book meetings. Like your customers might just snap at you. So all these problems will be there. But you as a PM have to remember that you have to focus on solving problems. So when you go there in the company, be that source of energy which is going to energize everyone else rather than be one more like person who's cribbing about all the problems. So I would say that is the most important part, that you need to change your attitude while you are joining an organization as a PM intern. That yes, I will focus on solving problems rather than just sit and crib about them. Right. So Aditya, do you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I think Vikram, you've covered most of it. So one major thing was, being over communicating with your manager, making sure you have regular cadences with him, saying, so that one thing is feedback is very important to improve, and make sure that you get continuous feedback in your first 2 weeks, as well as every 2 weeks at least, so that you can always course correct. The second thing, which is again very, very important, was asking the right questions. And that is super important because there'll be a lot of things you do not know when you're a PM, like maybe tech, maybe design, and this is the first time you're working on it, right? So it is very important to be shameless and say, hey, I do not know this, can you please give me a basic understanding of it? It is completely
Right.
fine to ask these questions. And the third thing is, sometimes for most people who they're college students, it'll be the first time in professional settings, so you might be a bit shy, you might be a bit introverted as well, and that is completely fine. Again, you can learn, because especially the remote setting, it's a bit hard to always be on a video call and talk. So make sure that you can try practicing. First thing which I did as a person was, before I even started any meet, I would actually write down notes so that I could read from a paper or something. But that's how you can get started at, but soon you'll gain practice on it. The second thing is, you can always open a webcam and practice yourself. May not be like, just record yourself speaking on in a video and just see where you are, faltering or something. So that is also very important, and this will really help you in interviews as well, right? Practicing your communication is one thing which is super important. And yeah, finally, the third thing is, again, if you do not know something, it is completely fine to agree that you do not know something, and then say that you will learn it. You will make sure that you put that effort to
Right.
learn it, and always communicate your progress as well. And finally, one thing which is very important for getting a PPO is building leverage, choosing the right project. So what you want to feel like is that, suppose you work on the right project which is slightly irreplaceable for a company, they'll always have friction in getting a new PM because you've already gone, like so deep into it, right? So it is important to try to choose a project which is having, has a meaty charter actually. So do be proactive and take it. Tell your manager that you can pick up this project and show that intent itself. It's very important to be proactive for it and not reactive. Don't wait for your manager to keep giving you work. You yourself can try to identify problems and try to at least tell your manager, hey, this is a problem I've identified, do you think I can solve it, right? At least do that, show that you're proactive enough to understand it. So yeah, these are the few
Right.
tips I can give you from my side.
Fantastic points, Aditya. I think you gave a lot of practical ideas as well about practicing in front of a camera, writing notes. And usually we feel that if we are practicing, that means we are not good at something. So even the greatest in the sports, they have had to practice thousands of times to just get that one shot right. So keep that in mind, that it's not a reflection on your talent if you have to work extra hard for something. It just means that you wanted more badly than others. So always have that in mind, that if you're practicing, it's because you want to be the best. And practicing does not mean that you are not as good as someone who is just very good impromptu. So there will be a lot of people who are good with public speaking. They'll not need to prepare. But you shouldn't look at them and feel that, oh, I am inadequate. You should focus on how you can maximize your chances of doing that thing great. If practice is the answer to that, then you might as well do it. So I'll quickly cover the points which Aditya didn't cover. First, and the most important, I would say, is build a relationship with your hiring manager and skip level manager. As Aditya said, set up weekly meetings, tell them what you did. And this is probably the most important part. Even if you don't perform that great as an intern, if you have a good relationship, you can easily get a full-time offer. Next is, as I said, build a great relationship with your immediate team, your designers, other PMs, because as a PM, you have to work with a lot of people. So if you gel along well with others, then it becomes very easy for the management to consider rolling out an offer, because they'll know that you'll easily fit into the team and you'll give a lot of output. Next is, any document or deck that you prepare, make sure that you give a lot of attention to detail. So it should be well polished, it should be formally written and completed on time. Now, this might require you to go through multiple iterations and multiple drafts, but that is fine, because this is your only chance of showing to the others how good your work is. So anything that you are given, always focus on like putting complete attention to detail in it. Next is another very important point. So uh, I think this is not something which is very ingrained in us, that we don't ask for feedback very often, because everyone is supposed to be perfect, which is not the case. So always ask for feedback from your manager, from your peers, and then work towards improving it. Next is, as I said earlier, also, if you're facing any problem, like always go with a solution to a problem that you're facing, rather than just go and take that problem to your manager and say, oh, I'm struggling with this, I don't know what to do. Always have some solution in mind, because usually what will happen is your manager will might usually ask you. So if I were your manager, I would definitely ask you this. Okay, so this is the problem. What do you think is the best way out of this? So if you're able to articulate that, then it will really impress the person who's sitting in front of you, that yes, you think in terms of the problem solver's mindset, which is a very essential skill for any product manager. Last is show ownership and responsibility, that the team should know, yes, you have that fire in the belly to do good, or be better than others. So that is very important to show. Right. So those were the points from our side on how you can boost your chances of getting a PPO. For the next segment of the session, I would like to invite Malvika on stage. So Malvika is a 2021 graduate from ISB. She has around 7 years of professional experience, deeply technical experience. She has worked as a VP with Goldman Sachs, and before joining ISB, she interned as well in the product management domain in a fintech company. So when I had this conversation with her on the session I had to work on, she gave a lot of good inputs, and I thought it would be great to have her come on stage and share them with you. So let me call Malvika on stage, and then we can begin with the Q&A with her. Hey, Malvika.
Hi, I hope I'm audible and visible.
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, great.
First of all,
Hi,
thanks a
everyone.
lot for joining us here.
Thanks, Vikram. Thanks, Aditya.
Hi.
So, Malvika, maybe you would want to start with like introducing your journey towards becoming a PM and then eventually going to ISB, so that the
Yeah,
audience has more context.
yeah, absolutely. So I'll just give you guys a brief about my past experience, and then we'll take it from there. So, as Vikram already mentioned, I have recently graduated from Indian School of Business, completed my MBA, and I'm going to be joining Postman, which is a startup in the B2B SaaS space. I'm hoping like a lot of you guys might have used it. So I'm joining there as a PM. And prior to joining Indian School of Business, I had around close to 7 years of work experience. I'd started my career as a software developer, and I'd kind of progressed in that domain as I moved ahead. So I became team lead, tech lead. I done fair bit of product management in my role at Goldman, because my role kind of entailed different aspects. So it entailed aspects of product, of being a technical manager, etc. And as you might guys, you might know that product management as a discipline is fairly new. So a lot of companies, while they have adopted it clearly, some of the companies are still in the bandwagon of adopting it. So even this might come handy for you guys as well when you join your companies in the future. So
Right.
in my career journey, I've built products both from a software perspective, and again from the product perspective as well. So I'll try to share some bits of it.
Right. So, Malvika, my first question is this: could you tell us a little bit about how you went searching for a PM internship, and like what was your motivation on that?
Yeah, yeah. So this whole COVID thing was both, it was both a challenge as well as an opportunity for me. So what had
Mhm.
happened was, I had an admit from ISB, and I quit my job, and I thought I'll
Mhm.
take a 1 month break. I'll travel and
Mhm.
have little bit of a nice vacation time before joining the rigorous program. But what happened was COVID came around, so I had some more time in my hand because our program got delayed and it got shifted by a few months. So around that time, I thought, since I'm free, I'll utilize this time and maybe join somewhere as an intern or a consultant.
Right.
And while and just to clarify, even though I had work experience, since I was formally changing streams, I thought getting a fresh perspective as an intern or a consultant will help me, and also help me understand personally whether this role is something I really want after my MBA. So from a
Right.
personal standpoint, that was the goal. And how I went about this search was, I started looking up different networks. Of course, I leveraged LinkedIn quite a lot. And
Mhm.
and there was another network which I used. It's called Network Capital. Although
Okay.
it's a paid network on Facebook, you can join it on Facebook. But I found it quite helpful in the sense that I used to post there that I'm looking for this so and so role for, let's say,
Mhm.
1 to 2 months, and then I got few replies. I got a few leads there. Finally, I think my conversation happened with three people, three different
Mhm.
firms, and I finally decided to join PayU, which is a fintech company.
So, were you always keen on joining a fintech firm, or did it something? Was it something that happened by chance? That were you fixated that this is the domain I have to go in?
Not quite fixated, but I was looking for domains which were more on the growth trend. So, what I
Mhm.
mean by this is that there are a few spaces or domains which always at any given point of time, they are growing
Right.
at a much more rapid uh, uh, they're growing at much more rapid stage as compared
Mhm.
to other industries. So for example, right now, fintech, edtech, these
Mhm.
industries are growing at a very fast pace as compared to some other traditional industries maybe.
Right.
So fintech was something which I was quite keen on. Also, I had an experience in financial services, so I thought I'll be able to contribute a little bit more from that angle.
Got it. And uh, who did you reach out to on LinkedIn while you were trying your internship? Were they recruiters or senior PMs? Like, how did you identify that? Okay, this is the company, and then how? What did you do next?
So when I was started when I started looking for the role, I started following people. So firstly, I started following some good PM groups. So there's PM
Right.
School. There are a few more groups who quite they keep posting about product management. There are a few
Right.
hashtags which I thought were useful, so I started following them.
Mhm.
From there, I got leads on people who frequently post about product management. And when
Right.
I started following these people, jobs and any opportunities which they would post about, they started appearing on my feed. That's how
Got
I
it.
got a lot of leads in terms of roles. Sometimes I
Got it.
also followed the companies which I was very keen on. Like I really found Razorpay very interesting, so I started
Got
following
it.
them very
Mhm.
closely, and came to know of opportunities if they were.
Got it. And if it's like not confidential, what were the kind of like projects which you were given during your internship? Like, what were the expectations from you?
Mhm. I think from the list that you mentioned, the first one, right, the market
Right.
research, I think that
Mhm.
was something. And you can think of the project as a combination of market research as well as something experimental that the company was trying to do.
Got it.
And so this was around improving developers' experience for a particular product which PayU had. And to
Okay.
just add a little bit perspective there, these days a lot of companies, while we see traditional products like which we can touch and feel like. So for
Right.
example, WhatsApp is an example of that product. But there are
Right.
a lot of more such products which other developers use to build their own products. So for
Right.
example, Postman is one such product, right? Or
Right.
there might be some more SaaS products, and a lot of
Mhm.
fintech companies fall in that domain because they
Got
actually
it.
sell, or their product is actually an API which other
Right.
companies use to get their customers or let their customers pay. So PayU had one such product where the customers were other developers from other companies, right? So
Right.
the idea was to improve the developers' experience, and this
Mhm.
was experimental because until that point of time, their focus was more on the end customer who was
Right.
actually going to pay on the platform and not on the developer. So this was new from that perspective, and there was no well-defined framework or anything that I could follow or lean on when I
Right.
joined. So from that, a lot of challenges also came.
All right. So the next logical question would be, what were the main challenges you faced, and how did you
Hmm.
go about resolving them?
Yeah. So I think, as I said, right, I when I joined, I had no clue. Like I understood what developers experience meant,
Mhm.
but I
Right.
had no clue how to go about it. And
Right.
while from a like whoever prepares for product, we know that
Mhm.
first step is to understand the customers, understand
Right.
their personas, pain
Mhm.
points, etc. So I try to follow a similar approach while doing this for developers as well. but obviously the nuances were a little bit different. And
Got
in
it.
other way, in other terms, like if I have to quote the challenges, right? First, the first and foremost that comes to my mind is, since I joined online and my entire journey of my internship or consulting was online, right? So
Right.
building relationships was extremely challenging, as well as I enjoyed it also because it gave me a chance to learn that this new skill, right? I think this is also one of the important skills which we now need to learn, how do you build relationships by just looking at a person on screen. And mostly when you will set up meeting and you will communicate only for a purpose, while in an office setting you meet people over coffee, etc., and you get those
Right.
informal chats as well. So this is also a skill set which we need to develop and which we
Right.
need to actively work upon. And I think two three more challenges which came during the journey was one of which you briefly mentioned, right? That there were different teams I was working with, and
Right.
each team had their own set of problems, and they thought these are the biggest problems, while
Right.
that wasn't true. If you think of the customer in between, right? If you think of customer
Right.
at the center of it, those burning problems were not the most important customer problems. So at that point of time, saying no to those people was sometimes challenging. And I think at that point of time you need to both adopt a strategic and tactical mindset, like tactically
Right.
you say no, but you don't really say no, right?
Right.
And sometimes you use matrix or you use data points to convince the stakeholders that why this can't be done at this point of time.
Got it. And did PayU have a culture of hiring PM interns, or were you the first one? So, how do they generally view interns? Is it like a standardized process, or was it a one-off case with you? How do they look at interns in general?
So they did hire PM interns, but that was mostly directly from college. And since
Okay.
I was kind of a lateral person, so my engagement with them was more classified as consulting. While
Okay.
it was an internship sort of a thing, you can think of like it like that, but they classified it as consulting. And they did hire PM interns, and they do have some structure around it. But for me, when I joined, I was since I came with experience, right? Their expectations were different. I wasn't
Got it.
handholded or I wasn't given a lot of mentorship per se. When I joined in the first week, of course, I had a few KT sessions to get me up to speed. But after that, I was kind of on my own, so I had to figure out the way. Initial 1 or 2 weeks, I would say it was very overwhelming, because you
Right.
feel like this new person in this whole place where everyone knows so much, they have so much of context, and you need to not only get there, but you also need to build on top of it and expect. People have very high expectations from interns, so
Right.
that was something.
Got it. And any like words of wisdom or any parting advice for somebody who will be joining as an intern, that how do they excel at that or boost their chances of converting it into a full-time offer?
Yeah. So when you told me that you're going to ask this question, I prepared like 5 points, which
Okay.
I think I'd share, right?
Sure.
So the first thing which comes to my mind, first and foremost thing is, as a product manager, we are expected to build or create success for other people and other products. So
Right.
it is important, and I think it is very important to gauge for your own self what is success for you. So
Right.
unless we have that clarity for our own selves, we can't do it for someone else. So I
Right.
think when you join any firm, it is very important to lay down clearly what is your own success, how are you going to be gauged. Once you
Right.
understand that, you can work towards it and maybe even exceed
Got
that,
it.
right?
Right.
And for this, one of the key things that you mentioned was to get timely feedback from managers, right? That is very, very important. Can't stress enough on it, because
Right.
unless you know what you're doing wrong or what can be done better, you can't improve.
Right.
um, the other thing also you mentioned was to kind of be a problem solver and
Right.
go with solutions. I think another
Yeah.
very, very important point, like whenever you have conversations with manager, mention the problem, but also mention that, okay, these are the three things or two things I thought how we could solve it, so that that person doesn't have to do the thinking for you. And those
Right.
people don't have time, right? Managers,
Right.
they're looking at tens and thousands of things, so they don't have time to do the thinking for you and tell you that, okay, do this. The second thing is, which is very important part of PM job itself, is to show empathy, right? And we are expected to show a lot of customer empathy, and this is to some extent this will come naturally over time. But and as an intern, we have very less time to show this to our managers or our teammates, and unless
Right.
we're empathetic towards our teammates or the people we are interacting with, they can't easily gauge if you'll be empathetic towards your customers, right? So I think that is something we need to very, we have to introspect, and we have to first gauge how much of it comes naturally. If it doesn't, it is a skill that again we can develop. So
Right.
we need to keep polishing it.
Got it.
um, the third thing is building relationships, right? So I think you mentioned that build relationship managers and direct and indirect teams, etc. So one of the key skill as a product manager would come is to manage stakeholders. And to
Right.
manage stakeholders, you would need to understand who are your stakeholders in the first place. So I would advise all the people who are going to be joining as interns or full-time hires is, in the first week, just keep a list. Write down a list of people who you think are your stakeholders. Right? Of course,
Right.
customers and managers and maybe skip level manager will naturally come, but there might be so many more teams. Like, your sales team might be a stakeholder. The customer support team is a very important stakeholder. So write down the list of all stakeholders that are there, both from a team and people perspective. So write down their names on a list, and then try to understand, get time with them. Try to understand what their problems, etc., are, where they're coming from, uh, you know uh, what are the things they think should be done, etc., and then build a story in your head about the product, about the team, about the place you're going to be in. And
Right.
then, it helps you, when you solve problems, it helps you understand, like, if a certain kind of problems come, whom to go to. And that becomes very handy when suddenly you're given overnight, like there's a problem that happens, like there was a break. Now you need to know what
Mhm.
needs to be done. So that point of time, these kind of relationships will come very handy. Along with this, we need to also understand different people's style. So one style will not work with everyone. Some people
Right.
are very good communicators, they would love to talk to you, while
Right.
others are more direct, and they would just want you, okay, mere ko bata do what is the thing that needs to
Right.
be done. So
Mhm.
we need to understand people's style, and then adopt to their styles. And at times, if you think the situation demands some other style, then we need to understand which style we need to utilize in that situation. Because
Right.
sometimes maybe you will leverage your relationships, but in other situations, when the situation is very, it is full of fire, you might need to
Mhm.
escalate also. So be open to those ideas as well.
Right.
And the last thing that I would like to mention here is that, if you don't get a PPO while you are, or maybe in your last week of your
Mhm.
internship, you should not lose heart. Okay, it
Mhm.
is important to note that at times there might be constraints the company has, and it might have nothing to do with you. You might be very good as an intern, but they don't have
Right.
resource or allocation at that point of time. So I would say that keep in touch with the manager, keep in touch with the organization people whom you build your relationship with. You never know what happens in the future. Like, for
Right.
example, in my case, when I was leaving the firm, while there was certain opportunity was there, I was very keen on joining my MBA, so I didn't want to take it up at that point of time.
Right.
But when I was going through my placement process at ISB, so the
Mhm.
manager again reached out to me that we also have this open position now, and we think you'll
Right.
be a good fit, etc. So
Mhm.
those situations might come in the future. So it's important to keep those relationships. I think that's
Got
all
it.
from my end. Yeah.
Got it. Thanks a lot, Malvika, for those wonderful insights. So we have one question. It's probably not related to this session itself, but maybe you can take a shot at it. So I've just shown it on the screen. So maybe this is a more fundamental question on your career switch, given that
Yeah.
software engineering also has a lot of opportunities and pay, and you are doing quite well for yourself. Why do you think you made this shift?
Okay. So I think it's a twofold question, Vikram. So firstly, why I made this shift, right?
Mhm.
Um, what I would say, everyone, is, again, you need to understand yourself very well. Of course, as a software developer, the pay rises at a very, very it's a steep curve, right? You can People
Right.
keep switching. People do so many, like, there's a lot of opportunities as a software developer also.
Mhm.
But once you understand yourself and what you are very good at, what comes naturally to you, I think that makes the whole argument very clear in your own head, and also to convince people, it becomes very easier. Like, for me, I knew at a certain point that, I will do the switch. I will move from a development domain to product domain.
Right.
Then the question just remained was how to make that switch. And the
Right.
answer could be, you could switch internally, you could make external switches, you could do an internship and then PPO, etc. You could do an MBA. There's so many routes. So people might take any of these routes, right? But it is important to understand why you're doing it, and for that you need to understand what you're good at. I think, and if it aligns, what product requires, if it aligns with your own interest, I think that is all. at the end.
Got
The
it.
second part of your question was the pay gap, right?
Yeah.
So of course that's a very good question actually, and very practical one.
Mhm.
As a developer, this was one of my very very big concerns when I was making the switch, right?
Mhm.
That I would have to take a huge pay cut, because I
Mhm.
would be starting almost afresh as a product
Right.
person, while at a software place I was at a particular level. So
Right.
first of all, I think one thing which I tried to do was leverage my background. I didn't make
Got it.
a switch from apples to oranges. I tried
Got
to
it.
make a switch where my past experience will push me or make me a better person for that particular firm. So even in
Right.
the case of PayU, they required someone with a lot of technical background.
Mhm.
So from that perspective it helped me. And again, the switch that I'm making now, like moving to Postman, it's a highly technical company, and their product is also used by developers. So I get both those perspectives very well, and I think that helped me a lot through my interview process as well. So that is the kind of advice I would give. In terms of pay cut, I think, I mean, I wouldn't say like focus too much on it. If you have made up your
Right.
mind to do the switch, of course, you might have to make some amount of pay cut, but of course, it should not be like you're taking like a 50-60% pay cut. Don't do that. Make a wise switch.
Yeah. So probably go with what your heart says, and once you start going with your heart, the money should like start falling. Maybe not in the first year as a PM, but definitely after 2-3 years as a PM, you'll start rising very fast, and eventually that
Yeah.
pay gap also does close
Yeah, I
because
think
you're actually
in the
enjoying
long
doing that
run,
stuff.
yeah, I think in the long run, it all comes together, right? If you enjoy what you do, as you said, right, it is
Right.
okay, I think.
Got it. Thanks a lot, Malvika, for sharing these wonderful insights. I
Yeah.
hope the audience also had a great time listening to everything which we discussed today. So we'll take a quick break around 10 minutes. Then we'll come back and discuss on the various aspects of using LinkedIn to get better at cracking internships. And yeah, meanwhile, you could take a break or just chat with the other participants on the table. We'll be back in 10 minutes. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.